Hi, I'm Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog, and I'm here today to wrap up the 11th annual Big Book Summer Challenge. The idea is simply to have fun reading bigger books during the summer. Many people have a little more leisure time, going on vacation, things like that. For the challenge, a big book is 400 or more pages, and you set your own goals in case you want to join next year. So many people choose just one big book that they'd like to tackle between May and September. Other people choose 2 or 3, however many you want. Some people choose as they go along. It's all fine. It's a very laid back challenge because it's summer. But summer, alas, is now ending, has ended. I'm just going to quickly wrap up my Big Book Summer, but also the whole challenge. So I haven't done the official tally and giveaway yet. There's a giveaway at the end of every Big Book Summer. Anyone who participates is eligible. But I did a quick count, and I think we had about 60 participants this year, more than ever from BookTube, as well as bloggers, and lots and lots, dozens and dozens of readers, people who don't have blogs or YouTube channels and just love to read. So we got some great conversations going on our Goodreads group this summer. I think everyone really enjoyed sharing what they're reading and chatting about it. It's so much fun to discover new books that way. So that was Big Book Summer number 11 as a whole. For my Big Book Summer, I finished 12 big books this summer. That's books with 400 or more pages. Half of those were on audio. First up, I kicked off Big Book Summer in a big way with Billy Summers by Stephen King. This book was outstanding. It is so good. If you are not a Stephen King fan because you don't read horror, this is not horror. It is, the first half to 2/3 of it really is a character study of this man named Billy Summers, who is a contract killer. He's been hired for one last job. He's going to make millions on it, and he figures he can finally retire after that. And this is about Billy and about his childhood and his background, how he came to be this killer. There is a book within the book because Billy is writing his memoir as he waits for the right time for this last job. Stephen King is so good at creating in-depth characters, and that is really spotlighted here. Billy is a fabulous character. Yes, he's a killer, but you're rooting for him almost from the very first pages. The people he works for are really awful, and as you get to know Billy better and his background, you're rooting for him even more. Now, the last third, definitely the last quarter of this book is more thriller-like. There is some violence. He is a killer after all. But the story as a whole just gripped me from the first page and never let go. Absolutely loved this novel. Never wanted to say goodbye to Billy. My first audiobook of Big Book Summer this year was The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara. Oh, this was a beautiful, heartbreaking, wonderful experience on audio. It's set in the late 70s through the early 90s in New York City and focuses on a group of gay and trans young people just looking for community, looking for friendship, looking for love. And it is about how it's based on real life, based on some real life people in New York during that time. And of course, that was also the time of the height of the AIDS epidemic in the 80s. And so that is there, but it's not That's not the focus of this book. The focus of it is on these young people, many of whom were abused, grew up in poverty, have these horrible backgrounds, and how they're searching and find a community and a home. It's really a beautiful book. I said it is heartbreaking, and it is. There are a couple of points especially, but it also often made me laugh out loud. It's a funny book. It's just got a lot of heart. The House of Impossible Beauties by Joseph Cassara. Next up, I spent most of June and the beginning of July reading Voyager by Diana Gabaldon. This was my biggest big book of the summer at 870 pages. That's why it took me a month to read it. But I have to tell you, I loved every minute of it. This was book 3 in her series that begins with Outlander. It's about a woman in 1940s who time travels back to the 1700s in Scotland. And about the epic love story between her, Claire, and a man named Jamie, who lived during the 1700s. In the last book, Jamie and Claire did leave Scotland to spend some time in France before they went back to Scotland. In this book, as you can tell by the title, they go back to France, but they also go on a huge voyage across the Atlantic Ocean to the Caribbean. I loved this book. 870 pages, and when I got to the end, I was so sorry it had ended. Lots of times with a longer book, as you get toward the end, you're like, this is still a good book, but I'm ready for something different. I wasn't. And in fact, there's a preview at the back of book 4, Drums of Autumn. And I finished this book and immediately began reading the next book. It is just that good. Highly recommend this series. If you haven't started it yet, start with Outlander. But I don't know, Voyager may be my favorite, but I think I said that on the last one too. So while I was reading that in print, I had time for a couple of audiobooks. I listened to The Strangers by Margaret Peterson Haddix. This is a middle grade thriller, science fiction thriller. Haddix is one of my favorite middle grade authors. I love the originality of her plots. She always creates great characters. There's always plenty of suspense. This is the first book in her Greystone Secrets series, and I can't wait to read more. So just briefly, right at the beginning, there are 3 siblings with very unusual names. Chess, short for Rochester, Finn, and Emily, which you may notice are all literary names. These 3 kids live alone with their mom. She's a single mom. Their husband died. Their father died a long time ago. And they come home from school one day and they're surprised to see their mom watching TV. She doesn't usually watch TV during the day. And they see that she is glued to a news story. And the news story is about, they're in Ohio. The news story is about 3 siblings in Texas who have been kidnapped. And their names are Rochester, Finn, and Emily. Oh, I think I got that wrong. I think the girl's name is Emma, not Emily. Anyway, so they see this news story about 3 kids with their same names. And as the newscaster keeps talking, they find out those 3 kids also have their same birthdays. So they have no idea what's going on. The next day, their mom goes out of town. They're staying with a friend of hers, and they begin to investigate. Great, twisty story. I can't wait to read more in that series. Then for a completely different change of pace, I listened to Everything the Light Touches by Janice Pariat. Now this has been compared to Cloud Atlas and Cloud Cuckoo Land, which I wanted to get to this summer and didn't, but I loved Cloud Atlas. It was compared to those because it has a similar structure in that there are 4 interlocking stories of 4 different characters in 4 different time periods, ranging from modern day back to the 1700s. 2 of those characters are actual, real-life historical figures. Linnaeus, who came up with our present-day method of categorizing and organizing the plant world, and Goethe, the famous artist and writer from Germany in the 1700s. And then we also meet Eveline in early 1900s England, who is traveling to India. She has a degree in botany, which is unusual for a woman at that time, and she really wants to see the unique flora in India. And finally, we get a modern day story of a young woman who goes to the remote northeastern corner of India to visit the woman who was her nanny as a child. And there she rediscovers the natural world, because this remote village is very much living in the past. And so all of these stories, what they have in common is nature and plant life. Those are the things that pull them all together. I really enjoyed this audiobook. It is beautifully written. There were different narrators for each character, for each section, and it was excellent. When I finally finished reading Voyager in print, I wanted something quick and fast-paced, so I went with Scythe by Neal Schusterman. I've been meaning to read this for ages. I'm a huge fan of Neal Schusterman, as is the rest of my family. As soon as I finished this book, my husband picked it up and he read it as well. This is the first book in his Arc of a Scythe trilogy. It is about a world far in the future where science has gotten to the point where death is no longer an issue. All the people have nanites in their bloodstream that quickly work to repair any injuries, that treat any pain, physical or emotional. And in this world of immortality, there are some humans who have been designated scythes. And their job, as you might guess from the cover, is to kill a certain number of people each year. So what they're trying to do is keep population steady, because everyone's immortal now. So some of them work based on like old actuary tables of, the way that people died when death was an issue. But this story in particular, in this first novel, is about 2 teenagers. This is a YA novel, who are chosen to be Scythe apprentices. And they don't want to be Scythe apprentices, but as their mentor tells them, that's why I chose you. The best Scythes are those that really don't want the job. So it is a fascinating world that Schusterman has created, as always, and lots of thriller action with these two apprentices as they learn how to be Scythes. Next up on audio, my husband and I were traveling a lot in July, so we chose an audiobook to listen to together. Well, I chose it, but I knew he'd like it. First Cut by Judy Melinek and T.J. Mitchell. This is book 1 in the Dr. Jessie Teska series. She is a medical examiner, fairly new to the job. She worked for a little while in LA. Something happened there, you get a glimpse of in the prologue. Someone showed up on her table that she recognized, and she left. She quit working for a while, and as this book opens, the first book in the series, she has just moved to San Francisco to work as an ME there. And it is a mystery thriller. It involves several different cases that Jessie encounters in the morgue, that she gets involved with helping to untangle, working with the detectives. We really liked this. It was a great start to a new series, It's kind of classic mystery thriller, and the rest of the series should be great. Next up in print, I always choose a classic for Big Book Summer, and this year that was The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. Now, I read this back in 10th grade, and I remembered that I liked it, but other than the bare outline of the story, a family immigrating to California, I really didn't remember much about the details. Oh, this book was fabulous. If you have not read it yet, or you haven't read any Steinbeck, I was just completely blown away by what a great writer he is. Obviously, I know it's a classic for a reason, but you know, sometimes classics are kind of difficult to read or slow. Not this. This was a gripping novel right from the first pages. His writing is just amazing. You really get to know this family. But it's more than that. It's not just the story of one family. It's also the story of an economic and cultural change that was taking place in the U.S., particularly with respect to agriculture. It's set in the 1930s. During the Dust Bowl, the family lives in Oklahoma. That's why they have to leave. They're thrown off their land. They were shareholders. So obviously, you know, there are some sad parts to this story. And things do not go well for the Jode family. There's a lot of tragedy here, but the way it's written, there were also times when I laughed out loud. He's just an amazing writer. I highly recommend this. My husband's going to read it next. Next up on audio, I listened to The Secrets Between Us by Thrity Umrigar. This is the sequel to her best-selling The Space Between Us, which I read over 10 years ago for one of my book groups. Absolutely loved that first novel, as did the rest of my book group. So I was really intrigued to see that she had written a sequel, and I am so glad she did. So this book focuses on one character from the previous book, though the other characters are in here as well, and that is Bima. Now, in that first book, The Space Between Us, which you don't necessarily have to have read to enjoy this book, the author provides the background for you, because it had been a long time since I read that last book, and I felt completely filled in. So from that first book, we had a character named Bima who works as a servant for an upper class woman. This should have said this takes place in India, for an upper class woman named Sarah. So in this second book, Bima is no longer working for Sarah. She's still living with her granddaughter in the Mumbai slums, and her greatest wish, the only thing she wants out of life, is for her granddaughter to have a better life, for her to go to college, graduate, get a good paying job, and finally get out of the slums. So this book really focuses in on Bima. She goes into business for herself when her cleaning jobs aren't quite doing enough, and she makes some friends. For the first time in her life, she makes some friends, some women who are very different from her, each in very different ways. But that's really what the heart of this book is about. It is about female friendship. I loved this book. I might have even liked it better than the first book. It's hard to compare because I read that one so long ago, but it is definitely worth reading or listening to. The audio was excellent. The Secrets Between Us by Thrity Umrigar. In August, I read The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles as a buddy read with Nikki of Red Dot Reads. If you're not familiar with her channel, it's wonderful. I will include it down below so that you can check it out. Nikki and I had a fabulous time reading this book together. It is about an epic road trip. It takes place in 1954. The main focus of the novel is on two brothers, Emmett, who is 18, and Billy, who is 8. Emmett has just gotten out of a juvenile work farm where he was sent for accidentally killing another boy during a fight. He is very glad to be home to Billy, but their father has just died. Their father was deeply in debt. So as Emmett explains to Billy, as soon as he gets home, he says, we can't stay in town. They live in Nebraska. Their home is foreclosed. So Emmett says to Billy, we're going to have to take my Studebaker and leave town and start over. Besides the fact that they've lost their home, Emmett knows that some of the townspeople will not forgive him for what happened. So to his surprise, Billy is 100% on board with this plan. He is very excited to leave and get on the road, and specifically on the Lincoln Highway. A big part of this book, Billy is kind of at the center of this book. He is a delightful character. Actually, most of the characters are pretty delightful. And Billy, this 8-year-old boy, carries around with him this fat book called Professor Abacus Abernathy's Compendium of Heroes, Adventurers, and Other Intrepid Travelers. And Billy has read this book over and over and over again. And what the professor has put together is a list of 26 heroes. Some are real historical figures, some are mythological, like Hercules and Ulysses. And Billy has read and memorized this book from cover to cover. So he is ready to have his own adventure. And he tells Emmett that he wants to take the Lincoln Highway out to California. So that's their plan. What they don't know is that 2 of Emmett's bunkmates have stowed away in the trunk of the warden's car when the warden drove Emmett back to Nebraska. So they pop out once the warden leaves and they say, great, we want to come along on this road trip. But we just have one quick stop to make first. And these 2 boys are nicknamed Duchess and Wooly. Wooly has to stop in upstate New York in the Adirondacks to pick up his trust fund. And then we'll all have plenty of money and we can make this trip together. So Emmett's not thrilled with this plan. And in fact, initially, he only agrees to take them to the train station. But things happen. A lot happens. There are so many twists and turns in this book. Those 4 characters are at the center of it, but we meet some secondary characters. I mean, this book is just delightful. Although Nikki and I both were not really happy with the ending. There is some tragedy that occurs at the end. This was an ideal book to read as a buddy read, and we both thoroughly enjoyed talking to each other about it. It was just so much fun, and we got so much more out of it. Each time one of us would finish a section, we'd leave a message. We each discovered that there were things the other person picked up that we had missed. This book is just so packed full of people and places and experiences, and the experience of enjoying it together just made it all that much better. It's really, you've heard me already say how much I loved all these other books I read for Big Book Summer. I don't know, this may be my favorite. It holds a special place in my heart. The Lincoln Highway by Amor, Towles. One of the audiobooks that I listened to in August was Lines of Courage by Jennifer Nielsen. This is a middle grade novel set during World War I, and it focuses on 5 different characters, kids between the ages of like 12 and 16, located in different countries in Europe, and their experiences during World War I. Now, I have to admit, I knew almost nothing about World War I. That's a little embarrassing to admit, But there are so many books written about World War II, novels as well as nonfiction, and I've read many of them. For some reason, World War I just doesn't get the same attention. So I loved this book. It's a wonderful middle grade novel. You really get to know these 5 young characters. Their experiences with the war are each different, so historically, you get the different aspects of the war, hunger, being sent out of your town, working with the wounded. One boy, actually 2 boys, are actually sent to fight in the war. The novel covers the whole war. So as they get older, they're sent off into the war. You get all of that from these 5 characters. And I learned a lot, but it was also just a completely engrossing novel and excellent on audio with multiple narrators. In August, I also read Afterland by Lauren Beukes. She is the author of The Shining Girls, which I loved. I love books about time travel. The Shining Girls is about, get this, a serial killer who can travel through time. Great premise, right? So it's a mystery and thriller, but it is also science fiction. Here, this is a science fiction thriller. This is dystopian. It's also apocalyptic / post-apocalyptic. I guess they're mostly through the worst part of it when this book opens. So what this is about is, it was published in 2020, so she didn't know about our pandemic. It's about a different pandemic, completely different, where there is a virus that kills off more than 99% of the males across the globe. So the men and boys who are left are valued, to put it in a positive way, sought after. That's where the dystopian part comes in. This novel focuses on a mother and son, Cole and her son Miles, who are on the run. They're on the run from the US government, from the private sanctuary where they were staying, and they're on the run from Cole's sister, who thinks it would be a great way to make millions of dollars to sell her nephew's sperm. So yeah, she's kind of a bad guy here, more than kind of. So the mother and son are on the run in the US. They're from South Africa. They want to get back there. Her husband was American, which is how they got stuck in the US. Fabulous book. The world building here, it's a really unique kind of setting. I mean, it's the US, but more than 99% female. Really intriguing, fascinating. The thriller aspects were very thriller-like. There's a lot of action and suspense here. I had given this to my husband a few years ago, and I really enjoyed it. Finally, I promise, this is it. My last books for Big Book Summer are crossover books that also count for the RIP challenge that I participate in the fall. So for me, that was The Night Fire by Michael Connelly. This is it's book 3 in his Renee Ballard series. He's best known for his Harry Bosch series. There are 22 books in that series, and Harry is in this, so this is his 22nd. This is a crossover book where Renee Ballard, a current female LAPD detective, is working with Harry Bosch, who is now retired, on a cold case. And Renee is also juggling her current cases in the present day. As always, Michael Connelly's just so much fun to read. These books just fly by. They're filled with mystery, suspense. There's always some thriller aspect, particularly toward the end. Really enjoyed The Night Fire by Michael Connelly. And my last audiobook for Big Book Summer was A World of Curiosities by Louise Penny. This is book 18 in her Inspector Gamache series. Now, I have not read the whole series. I came late to it. I read book 1, Still Life, for one of my book groups, and then didn't read any other books until I had the opportunity to read book 15, A Better Man, on audio. And I really enjoyed that. So last year when book 17 came out, The Madness of Crowds, I also listened to that on audio. So this is book 18. So I have read a few of the recent books. What I like about the more recent ones, I'm liking these later ones much better than Still Life. Still Life to me was a nice mystery, but nothing special. But as the series goes on, she's getting more emotional complexity, more in-depth. She is addressing issues that are relevant in our modern world. The Madness of Crowds addressed extremists. This one, A World of Curiosities, there is a mass shooting that occurs in it. And this one, like the Michael Connelly that I read, this one also has both a new case and an older case. And so there's some crossover there. The older case is the very first one that Inspector Gamache worked with Jean-Guy, who's been a main character throughout the series. So that's really interesting seeing that history as well. Very much enjoyed A World of Curiosities by Louise Penny. That's what I read for Big Book Summer. Did you participate in the challenge this year? If so, let me know in the comments down below what you read. If you did participate in the challenge, you're not required to, but you can write a blog post or do a wrap-up video if you want to. You can also stop by the Goodreads group, whether you're on YouTube or not. There's a wrap-up thread there where you can talk about what big books you read this summer if you participated in the challenge. And if you didn't participate in Big Book Summer, what was your summer reading like? What were the highlights? What were the challenges you did? What were the fun parts about summer reading for you? Let me know in the comments below.